We're breaking down all of the Ableton settings one page at a time. Let's get right into it. Today we are going to look at, I'm going to open up my settings with Command comma, and we're going to File and Folder. So this one's a pretty simple one. Create analysis files is our first setting on this page. It's essentially, you might have noticed sometimes when you're working on your Ableton, you bring in an audio file, even maybe just record into it, and you'll notice there's, .asd. And so what this does is it automatically, anytime you record or you bring in a audio file, that creates a .asd, which is essentially Ableton saving its analysis of that particular audio file in order to warp, change the pitch, change the speed, things like that, and not have to work as hard. So I always leave this on. It does create more files in your Finder, and you might be confused as to why is there this random thing, and it's essentially just Ableton saving its analysis. So it says, okay, I checked out this audio file, this is how it's going to warp, blah, 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 and that way it doesn't have to do that math again. Our sample editor. So sometimes you've got a file in your arrangement. If I click here, and I can always change with Shift Tab, whether I'm looking at the devices or whether I'm looking at the clip editor, and you'll see there's this little edit button here. And I can't edit this because it's an Ableton one, but if I go to samples and I bring in, say, this, then I can, because this is my own file, I can edit it, and that will open up Melodyne, because on my system, Melodyne 5 is my chosen sample editor. You can choose a different app if you want to, do those edits with a different application. Here we have our temporary folder, so you can choose where you want files to go. If, for example, like in my case, we're working on an untitled, we haven't saved our session yet. Where do you want Ableton to put those files before you've actually saved and assigned a location on your computer for the audio that you're working on? Sound content analysis. This is relatively new and pretty cool. So you can find similar sounds in Ableton. So all this is going to do is automatically in the background while you have Ableton open, it's going to be analyzing the files that are in your library to find similar ones. So I'll show you a quick example. I just loaded this acoustic kick loop. If I go to samples and then I choose in my filters kick, see, this is the one I just brought in. And if I select it, we get this little kind of like, it's a tilde over a line. And then it's going to show all of these different ones that sound somewhat similar, right? So it's a pretty awesome feature. And so this is just allows Ableton to, in the background, automatically be indexing and determining what is similar to what. Max, if you're using Ableton Live Suite, or if you've bought Max separately, this is essentially just choosing what version of Max you're going to use. I've never changed this setting. I just always use the bundled version. I'm not deeply into coding my own things in Max, so there's other YouTube channels who would be able to tell you way more about using Max. And in the same way, there's other channels on YouTube who can tell you way more about what really the cache does. But the way that I think about the cache is kind of, where Ableton just temporarily deals with files. So you can see that while you're playing back a session, Ableton's going to be loading things up into your memory, your RAM, random access memory, which is different than your hard drive, right? Your computer has maybe a terabyte of hard drive, but your memory is maybe 16 or 32. So that's what they mean when they're talking about the free space in your memory. So the free space, you can say, I always want to have at least half of a gigabyte available. So Ableton will be aware of how much of your memory, not hard drive, memory it's using, and make sure to keep, however much you set there. And if I double click, it'll reset to its default setting. You can also just put a maximum cache size, be like, I never want Ableton to use more than 10 gigabytes of my memory. You can also clean that up if it's carrying a bunch of things that you're not currently using. And you can choose where on your computer that cache folder is, where it puts kind of the temporary files of where you're working on, which is different than the temporary folder files. This is kind of like what it's currently loaded up from the hard drive into the memory. Once again, it's people who are really computer nerdier than me will understand this even better than I do. But yeah, that's kind of how that works. So that is the file and folder page. I hope this might have been clarifying more than confusing. Please like, follow, subscribe, all that stuff. If you've got questions, leave them in the comments. Would love to help you out, and I'll see you in the next one.